With this video, I'm going to show you how I look at your week 3 assignment to submission. So you'll see how I assess it. And here is a random work submitted by one of my students. And so the first thing I do is I open it in Illustrator and I take a look, just looking with my eyes, not really testing anything, to see if I can see, if I feel as though the backgrounds here or the ground colors here are working to give a different impression of the carried colors. And in this case, I think it's working out really well. And sometimes I'll think that, the ground color is so effective at changing the carried color that I'll use my eyedropper with my HSB palette just to make sure that they are in fact all the same. And if I have to do that, then that means the student's done a really good job. Now, assessing part 2, two colors as one, is much more complex and it takes more time for me. And of course, I'm happy to put that time in, but I just want to make sure you know that I take a close look at this work. So what I usually do is I just replicate exactly what you have here, and I just draw my own rectangles, put them roughly where they belong. And then I pick up the carried color and I color the background color and the carried color the same color. So, and then I bring in my HSB palette. So now all I'm dealing with is the carried color, and I'm not really paying any attention to the ground colors that have already been placed there. So what I do is first I use ground subtraction and I redo the assignment, thinking, well, if these were the colors I chose, how would I try and bring these together using ground subtraction. So I start by assessing the degrees between the two colors, and here we have 15 degrees for the orange and 1 degree for the red. So with ground subtraction, we want the ground color to move in the opposite direction of the pair, of the carried color pair. So if the orange is 15 degrees, then I'm going to want the ground for the orange to be further away from red. And likewise, for the red, I'm going to want the ground color to be further away from orange. So I'm going to move right up to the pink scale here. So if I'm using ground subtraction, this is where I would start, and then of course I would start working with value and saturation. So I would want this one to have a much darker background so that the carried color looks lighter, and here I want the carried color to look darker, so I'm going to give it a much lighter background. And then I sort of play around from there, but I'm not going to do that now for this video because it does take a while. But I just assess and I realize, well, this student hasn't used carried color, hasn't used ground reduction to do this assignment. So perhaps they've used after image. So then I'll go ahead and I'll do the same thing. I might even go back to where I started and I think about how I would do this assignment using after image. So if I want the red to look more orange, then I'd want a background that was perhaps a little bit more blue, because blue or a blue towards violet is going to produce an orangey after effect. After image, so that's the influence we want to have there. And now for the orange, if I want the orange to look more red, then I'm going to want to have a greeny cyan background color there. And once again, then I would go in and play with the value to make sure I'm getting the right value and trying to bring these colors together using after image that way. Now, in that case, I'm assessing, well, this student didn't use after image either, so obviously the student isn't quite sure about what they're doing. And then I would go back to the post and say, well, what were you thinking about ground reduction or after image? And maybe why did you choose blue? What do you think the after image for blue is, and how would that color affect the red, and so on. So trying to engage the students in a conversation about how after image or ground reduction works, and then of course offering the opportunity to have that student resubmit the work, or you, if you are the student. Okay, and then I would go on to the next work, just copying over my shapes and then recoloring them once again. First looking for the degree of difference between the colors. So here we have 172 degrees and here we have 193. So I'm going to want the ground color here to get more blue, move away from this green, and I want the ground color here to move away from blue, so moving towards yellow there. So now I can see that if this student is using ground reduction, the ground color here behind E is probably a good choice. That's starting to work to take the green qualities away from that color, but they haven't understood that they need to use a blue background to take the blue qualities away from this color and to make it look more green. But I can say that this student has thought well about the value of the colors, because they're using a darker color here in the ground to make the foreground or the carried color brighter. And of course I think that they would want to really lighten this one up a bit to make it look darker. And I think here we're getting a good example of how these two colors can come close together. Okay, so that's how I work on your assignments for week 3 assignment 2. Practically I do redo the assignment, and I hope that that's helpful for you in understanding how to assess your own work and how to assess your colleagues' work when you're doing a critique.